Hi and hello, and welcome to our webinar on the customization of Studio Suite. Again, this is Studio Suite X, and this is our one of our webinars that we're doing every Thursday going forward in the future. My name is Byron Martinez, and I'm a lead developer over here at Studio Suite. I'm also the lead technical support guy and the integrator. So for any of you guys thinking about purchasing Studio Suite in the future, more likely when it comes to customizing Studio Suite and integrating it with your current workflow, I'll probably be the person you're talking to. Again, our company is Altimedia, and this session is about customizing Studio Suite. Just going to go over a few things about the webinar. The webinar is going to run about 40 to 45 minutes approximately. There's going to be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. We're also recording this and it will be posted to our website so you can go back and view it in the future. If you had any particular questions or maybe you didn't understand something, you can go ahead and view it again. And you can also send me questions regarding the webinar itself, to clarify a certain portion of it if you needed me to do that. Future webinars are on Thursdays. The schedule is on our website. You can go to studiosuite.com, and at the bottom, and there should be a series of blue buttons, and one of them should read webinars, and there you can download our schedule and all our future webinars. You can go ahead and type questions as I proceed with the webinar, and at the end we'll try to address all the questions. And sometimes if a question needs to be addressed immediately just because of its context, I might stop and address that question right there. This demo is intended to demonstrate basic customizations in Studio Suite and some of the more commonly requested modifications in the system. So I'm going to make a few assumptions here. I'm going to assume that you have FileMaker installed, FileMaker Server if you're running the server version of Studio Suite or the trial. As far as the installation is concerned, it can either be the trial version or the purchase version. Both should work fine. You should have registered it by now and be able to log into the system. So what do we mean by customizations? I like to break down customizations into three portions: basic customizations, commonly requested customizations, and advanced customizations. Under basic customizations, we're talking about the modifying fonts and different properties of the fonts. Also, going between layout mode and browse mode in FileMaker. While you're in layout mode, being able to position different objects on the layout, and also user field utilization. Studio Suite actually comes with a number of fields in the system because typically from time to time, we don't cover certain, we don't have certain fields in the system that a user might need. So what we do is we just send out a number of user-defined fields that you can use to your own discretion in the future. Also, commonly requested customization. Whenever a new customer purchases Studio Suite, these are some of the most common things that we normally get asked by our customers, which is, can you modify our invoice printout? And also, can you modify your work orders so we can look and resemble like what we've been using for the past X amount of years? Data export to Excel. This has to do with the limitations of Studio Suite and the limitations of FileMaker. Sometimes people want to export the data to Excel to get it into a system that they're quite familiar with, and that way they can display the data in a format that's common to them and their users. Advanced customization. It says FileMaker scripting here, but really and truly, FileMaker scripting it ranges from basic to advanced. Because we developed the system and we are advanced FileMaker developers ourselves, most of our scripting are pretty advanced. So if you want to go ahead and follow our scripts and modify our scripts, you are going to have to know you are going to have some high level of familiarity with FileMaker scripting and FileMaker coding. But that being said, there are ways that you can create basic, simple script to do everyday tasks that you just need for your purpose and your purposes only. And that in itself is pretty basic. As far as customizing Studio Suite is essentially a solution that exists on top of a platform called FileMaker. So if just about anything that we're doing, and most of the things that we're doing inside Studio Suite can be learned if you know FileMaker. And you can go to FileMaker.com. There's a number of resources on there to teach you how to script in FileMaker, how to modify layouts in FileMaker, and just about everything that we're going to cover today. You can learn all that at FileMaker.com. There's a number of sites out there like FM Forums that there's a lot of users out there that will teach you how to modify FileMaker databases, and the web in general has a number of resources that you can use. Now that we've covered all those basics right there, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that our next webinar will be held on February 14th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and this will cover budgeting in Studio Suite with Joel Stoner, our CEO and founder. At the end of this webinar, you will receive an email with a survey. We would love it if you filled it out and just give us some feedback as far as how we're doing with these webinars. That being said, thank you. Now let's move on to the webinar. This is my desktop right here, and I have Studio Suite loaded up. This is our main menu. These are all our modules. Most of you guys probably have already seen all this and are quite familiar with the system. So I'm just going to go into showing you some of the first topic under basic customizations. I'm going to go to our details tab. And here we have a record in FileMaker. A lot of the functions that you're going to need to know about will exist right under either under the records menu up here. This is how to create a record, duplicate a record, delete a record, or under the scripts. This is where you would create your scripts to do normal, everyday, basic processes. Under basic customization, I spoke earlier about modifying fonts. So if you need to make a font larger, make it smaller, change the color of a font, this is how we would cover that aspect of the modification right here. So in FileMaker, whenever you want to modify something in a database, there is two levels that you need to be aware of. There's a display level, which is browse mode. Now we're in browse mode. We're seeing the effect of the database design in browse mode, and all the modes are listed down here. We have browse, find, layout, and preview. So to modify a font, let's just say for instance, I didn't like the size that Charlie and Thompson is coming in right here, which is the first and the last name of this client that I have in my system, and I wanted to make the font a little bit larger. Right now, I think the standard size is font 12. So if I wanted to make this font larger, what I would have to do is I would have to switch modes and go into layout mode. Now, don't be intimidated by the look of layout mode. This is the same database that we saw previously, but this is the layer to which we can actually modify the database. In layout mode, I see the first name field right here and the last name field. So if I wanted to make the font larger for all the records in this database, I would just click on the field, and then right up here, you see all the different attributes about the text that's being displayed. I can actually go and increase the font to, let's just say, 2 points larger, and then I'll do the same thing for the last name. Now, if I want to see the effect of that change I just made, I'm going to switch back into browse mode, and you're going to notice now that Charlie Thompson is 2 points larger. Now, actually, I want to go back. I'm just going to go back and undo what I just did. So to revert this change back, I'll just click on this guy, hold down the shift key and click on this guy so I can have both of them selected, and then change the font back to 12 points. So that would be a basic customization right there. The same thing would apply to if you wanted to change the color of the font. So if I wanted the company name, for instance, to stand out whenever you fall in this layout, I can say, let's change the company name font to red, and switching back to browse mode, we'll see now that the company color is red. Those changes are only going to take effect on this layout. So if you see now, I'm going to scroll through these records, and you'll notice that all the company colors are red wherever there exists a company. Let me go back, and I'm going to make one additional change. I'm going to make that same change that I did earlier on the first and last name and change those fonts to 14. Go back to browse. Now I'm going to change my layout. This is in FileMaker, we call this view in particular the details view. I'm sorry about that. I just kind of skipped my head. I'm going to go to the list view where I can see a list of all my companies and a list of all the records inside the system. And you'll notice that even though I changed the company name on the previous layout, it's not, even though I changed the company name to red on the previous layout, it's not reflected on this layout. That's because every object is distinct in every layout that you go to. So if you wanted that same change to take effect here, you would also have to go into layout mode on this layout and change its color to red. And then you'll see that change take effect here. Now, this just happens to be one of the pitfalls, in my opinion, of FileMaker, is that every time you want to change an object, you have to change it on every single layout or on every single instance of that object, no matter where it resides in the system. And a lot of times, if, like for instance, with this company name field, we might have something in the order of like a couple hundred instances of this object running across the system. So if you wanted this field to be red throughout the system, you'd have to basically find all those instances and change them manually. It's a severe drawback, and it's something that FileMaker is working on. So I'm just going to revert this color back, go back to our main menu, revert this guy back, and this guy. Now, because we're developers over here at Studio Suite, we have a feature and a function currently turned off that more likely you will have turned on when you first purchase a system. And what it is whenever you make a change to a layout, if you have this feature turned on, it'll ask you whether or not you want to commit that change. So you have what you saw just now was this feature is actually turned on, right? It says save layout changes automatically, do not ask. So I want to turn this off. So that, and this is how you're going to get the system, so that if I do make a change and I go to exit the layout back to browse mode, it'll ask me, do you want to save these changes? And I have the option to back out, before I commit the change, because once the change has been committed, there's no way of undoing it. So here, once you get comfortable with FileMaker, you can go ahead and turn that on, and then you'll never see that dialog box again. A quicker way to get in and out of layout mode is simply by clicking on Edit Layout right here. So if I click on Edit Layout, Exit Layout, you can toggle the modes. Now, I think that's about it as far as that should be pretty straightforward and simple as far as how to change an object, change a font. Layout properties. Whenever you go into layout mode, you have an inspector over here. And this is tracking a number of properties about this layout. And also, whenever you click on an object, it gives you properties about that specific object. So this is a pretty handy tool. Allows you to, without having to go diving into all the different tools in the menu bar, you can just find it in this inspector. And if you're using any Adobe product nowadays, a lot of these tools should be pretty standard and familiar to you. Moving objects in the layout. Once you're in layout mode, the form that you see here is dictated by what you have in layout mode. So if you wanted to move a field, make a field larger, make a field smaller, you would have to do it in layout mode, and that will be reflected on in browse mode. So for instance, I'm going to take this SMS number field right here and make it taller and longer. Now, once I exit layout mode and go into browse mode, you'll see that field got taller and longer. But you didn't see the taller part because it was hovering on top of this field at the bottom. But a more drastic change would be if I actually took this field and said that I wanted to place it up here. I'm going to make it smaller. So that would be a more drastic change right there where you see that the field actually got displaced. One major thing that is new in FileMaker 12, and this I think this started since FileMaker 10, is the ability to make objects and the layout float. So each object has an anchor, and I don't want to go too deep into this. You might have to look this up on the internet or something like that to get more information about it. But basically, when I click on an object and I go to the inspector, it's showing me what is this object going to do once the screen is resized. And this object in particular, this address to field, is its direction is to anchor to the top. This means do not leave your top position, do not leave your left position, and do not leave your right position. So what this is going to do is it's going to stretch from left to right. So as the screen size changes, you'll see that this object, which is address 2, is stretching from left to right. And if I go up or down, it keeps the top position and it doesn't change. So a lot of times, when in Studio Suite, if you're moving an object around and all of a sudden you see the object disappears or is floating all over the screen, is because you need to set the anchor relative to something that's right near it. So now, when I moved this object earlier, I changed the anchor to anchor top and left. So it's going to stay in the top and left position. If I was to move this object back over here where it actually belongs, you'll see that the object starts to misbehave and it's out of place because it's trying to keep its position. As the screen is getting longer, the objects around it are moving to the right, but it's not moving to the right. So what we need to do is go back in, click on the field, and what I like to do is I like to look at a field that's right nearby and look at how this field is anchored, and then I'll just copy that anchor and put it over here. So once I click on this field, I see it's anchored top right. So I'm going to go back and click on this field, and I'm just going to make it top right and take off the left anchor. Now this field is actually going to slide and move appropriately, and it's not going to get caught. The anchoring is it's not too difficult, but it is kind of tricky sometimes when you throw a field in the layout and all of a sudden you can't find it, you can't see it. More likely it's because of the anchoring. I'm going to move on down to object and position. Well, object and position, and that's pretty much what we just covered, which is how to move an object around the layout. Your field objects are your most typical objects. Then we have more complicated objects like this guy, which is a portal. What a portal does is a portal shows a number of records spanning from a different database, from a related database. So if I was to go in here and look at these calls and notes section, this is all the calls that this Robbie Troy, this is all the calls and notes relating to this Robbie Troy. This database actually resides in our communications module. So I'm just going to go out real quick and go to communications. And if I actually did a search in our communications modules for Robbie Troy, you'll see that one note that we just had. Let me go back and find it real quick. Let me just make another note so we have multiple notes. I'm just going to say she called and we spoke about this. If I click on this go to button, it's going to take me to that communications module, and I'm going to see that I have 2 communications for Robbie, that we spoke about this record and the one that was right beneath it. Now I'm just going to go back to Robbie's record so we can see those 2. And the more communications that we get from Robbie, you're going to see that this portal actually expands with content. Now, when you move data, when you move a field in or out of this portal, you're going to want to make sure that the fields are from the same relation as the portal. So we have this portal by the name of communications and calls. So if I wanted to throw a field into this portal, I'm going to have to make sure that it's coming from this very same relation. So if I click on this field right here, this what field, we're going to see that this what field is actually coming from the portal of communications and calls. If I wanted to display another field, let's just say status, from this portal, typically the easiest thing to do is to go in and copy this field, and we're going to put a copy of it right next to it. Double click on it, and then just change the field. So now we can have, instead of just having three fields coming through this relationship, now we can have 4. This tends to be pretty important whenever you want to see additional data from another location. By default, we put these portals on a layout with certain fields on them, and if you want to expand what you're viewing from another database, you can go in and add additional fields in there. You might not be seeing the full scope and the necessity of this, but later on, once we get to the project module, you'll see why you want to get information from another location without having to go to that location. I'm just going to remove this. And unlike a field, a basic field, moving around data in a portal gets to be pretty tricky, because if this field was to fall outside the scope of this portal, then you wouldn't be seeing the correct information for this client from this relationship. So be a little bit careful when you're dealing with portals. Again, there's extensive resources online as far as how you can deal with portals and how to manipulate them. Now I'm going to move on to user field utilization. The user fields are, even though we have a number of fields inside Studio Suite, I think each database ships with a couple hundred fields. Obviously we can't think of all fields that all of our users are going to need. So we ship with a default set of user-defined fields that you can use to your own discretion. So if you was to log into our contacts module and you said, for instance, that you needed a field to track a member ID from another database, for instance, what you can do is, because we don't have a member ID field, you can go into layout mode, and I like to just duplicate a current and existing field. So I'm just going to pick this SMS number field, for instance, and I'm going to go ahead, right click it, say I want to copy, I want to paste it over here, and then you double click on this field. Now you don't have to worry about where the data is coming from, because you're in the same database. It's telling you that it's coming from the current table called contacts. And I'm just going to scroll down to the section where I see all my user fields. And because we're going to track a number, a member ID number, I'm just going to click on user number 1 and hit OK. Then, like I told you previously, you're going to want to check the anchor, right? Because we don't want this to float incorrectly. So I'm just going to look at it and see how it's floating. And it's actually floating correctly with everything else. It looks pretty good. The next thing you're going to want to do is label this field. So labels are pretty simple. Up here, you see we have the little T tool. This is for text. I'm just going to click on text. Click right here. And I'm going to call this member ID. I'm just going to size this down a little bit so it can actually fit comfortably. And move this object. And let me size this down some more. Typically, our labels are 9-point font and gray or white. So what you can do is, what I like to do is use the copy tool. So I'm going to go back to my inspector and click on appearance. And then I'm going to click on a label field. And let me show you what the label field looks like outside. So outside, you'll see that the label fields are normally either gray or white if they're being if it's on a portal header. So because this one is going to be on this dark gray background, more likely I'm going to want the white color and the white font. So to make everything look consistent across, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this white label font right here, and then I'm going to use this copy tool. Then I'm going to go back to my member ID text that I just created, and this is the paste tool. So I'm going to click on it, paste it, and you'll see that it changed. And not only did it inherit the color, but also inherited the font type, and the font size. And then I'm just going to position this with my arrows, making sure it's sitting nice and comfortable. Go into browse mode, check the float. It's floating incorrectly. So I'm going to click back on this object, click on position, and tell it to float right, and leave your left anchor alone. Now we'll see that the member ID is floating to the right. And so if you are, let's just say, for instance, you're a public, television station, or you're doing, something that you need to track members and their IDs from another system. This is where every time you create a new member, you would just type in, this is my member number, this is his member number. Now, this object is only appearing on this specific layout. If you want this to appear on subsequent layouts, you would have to remember, one, the name of the field you're using, which in our case is user number 1, and then you would have to go put this field on every layout that you want to see it presented on. Whenever you make a modification like that, where you're using one of our user fields, it's probably best that you use our customizations module. And let me explain what the customization module is. Well, the customizations module tracks all the customizations that you've done in your system for future uses. Because whenever you make changes in Studio Suite and a new version of Studio Suite comes out, you're unable to port those changes over. So if we was to ever create a field for you or a table, and I'll explain what creating a table is later on, but if we ever create a table for you, that information will not port over in the next version of Studio Suite. So because the information does not exist, it will not come over, and so you'll lose all your data. What we typically do is we go back into your old system, look at how it was created, who created it, when it was created, and then we use that information to recreate it in the new system. So all customizations have to be recreated. So because in the contacts module, because I just used that user number 1 field to store the member ID information, this isn't the type of information that you would typically forget when you move over to a new system, but it doesn't hurt to just go ahead and recreate and just say, utilize user number 1 field to track member IDs. So here it is, and typically you just want to say what module that it was done in, and that information is just about enough right there. And so whenever we actually do an import for you, or we upgrade your system, we typically tend to look in here to see if there was any major customizations done that we need to redo or that needs to be addressed before we actually import the data. So I'm going to go back to our contacts module again. And you'll see that we have our member ID here. If we wanted this information to be displayed in the list view, for instance, in this list view, I would actually have to come over here and make some room for it. So let's just say I wanted the information to be displayed between the company name and the username. I can size this guy down, copy it, paste, size this guy down, double click on it, go down to user number 1, click on OK. So let me create a little bit more space here. and you'll see that we have our member ID right next to the username. So again, if you want this to be displayed in multiple layouts, you have to actually carry that information all the way through. And typically, people just want to see it in a couple of layouts, and that's fine. So let me size this back. Now, I'm going to move on to covering some of the most commonly requested customizations, which is the modification of the invoice printout and the work orders. Modifying printouts is a little bit more difficult, but here I have a work order. I'm in my projects module right now. I have a work order, and if I click on print this, here my work order is showing me all the line items on this project. Let's do this real quick. It's showing me all the line items on this project, their dates, times, their statuses, amounts, and totals. So if I click on print this up here, it'll show me a printout of what the customer would see. Sometimes people say, oh, whenever we send out our printouts, we don't like to put the dates on it. So could you just remove the dates? We don't need the dates. So that's going to be our task for today, is modifying that. Whenever you click on print this, I'm going to retrace my steps one more time. What you'll notice up here in the upper left-hand corner is the layout that you're actually sitting on. In Studio Suite, the layout that you see when you're administering the system is different than the layout that actually prints. This has to be formatted for 8.5 by 11 or letter size if you're in the UK. So you have to pay attention to the layout that actually goes to the print. In this case, it's events, and I just happen to know that this is actual charge print. So what we're going to do is we're going to exit this, go back to our browse mode of the display page, go into layout mode, go up to the layout section, and I'm going to click down, and there should be a print folder. Go to print, and I'm going to go to the events section and find the layout by the name of events actual charge print. So this is actually the layout that we were viewing earlier. I'm going to go back out of layout mode on this layout, go into print mode, go into browse mode, and I'm going to click on the preview button to see what the printout actually looks. So as you're modifying the layout, as you're modifying this layout, you're going to want to go in and out of print view, in and out of preview, to see what the actual printout is going to look like. And that will tell you, that will show you the changes that whether or not the changes that you're making are taking into effect. So now I'm going to go into layout mode, and I'm going to go to the body of the printout. This is the body section right here. I guess this is a good time to explain the different layout, the different parts of layout. So a layout will typically have a header, a body, and all the way at the bottom we have a footer. You have some other sections. This little section denoted with this S is called a sub-summary. And if you have a sub-summary on, whenever you go to a layout and you do a sort, it'll summarize by your sort. So if your sort is by projects, and let's just say your sort is by projects and you want to sort all your projects alphabetically, it will sort alphabetically by projects, and then it'll show all the events pertaining to that project. And then it'll go to the next project, show all of its events, and so forth. But the body of the printout is essentially what you want to control. So all that information that we were seeing about dates and times on the printout earlier, that's actually stored in the body. Now, and this is very, very, very important. Whenever you're making a modification to a layout, it's very, very important that you go up to the layouts menu up top and you duplicate the original layout. Just in case you mess something up, you can go back, make a reference to the original, and fix whatever it is that you messed up. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, and it's doing its thing and duplicating. And now it's telling me that I'm on the, obviously, I already had a copy presented here previously, so it's telling me that I'm on the second copy of that layout. Now, this is not the layout that you want to. This is not the layout that you want to modify. This is just the layout that's keeping all the original information. So I'm going to go back up to print events actual charge, and this is the layout that I'm going to modify. And whenever you do that on the PC, there's a bug that on the PC, no matter what you choose from this layout menu, it'll always put you on the last layout. I think it's a XP bug. They might have gotten rid of it after XP. So you just want to make sure that after you make your layout selection, especially on the PC, that you're not on the last layout or some different layout. If you are, then you're going to have to use this layout tool right here to go back up or down to find the layout that you want to modify. So I'm going to go back to my print menu, go to events, event actual charge, and my task earlier was to remove the date, the start and end date. So I'm going to click on the start and end date, and I just happen to know that there's a hyphen between the two. If this is unclear to you, you can use this zoom tool at the bottom left. We have a minus and a plus button. I'm just going to click on the plus button to zoom in. Should be a lot closer now so you can see the hyphen. So I'm going to select the start, click shift click and select the hyphen, select the end date, and I'm just going to move this off the layout. So I'm going to put it right here. Whenever you do that, anything, let me zoom back out, anything that's to the right of the dotted line will not print, and it won't even show up on the layout. So usually whenever I make changes to these layouts, I just tend to move them off, because 9 out of 10 times, or maybe 8 out of 10 times, customers always go, oh, 3 months later, can you bring back the start date and the end date? So you don't want to have to go through and find those fields again, so they'll just be right here waiting for you. Now if I go back into browse mode and go into preview, you'll see that we don't have any dates now. Now what are we going to do with all that real estate that we just bought? We can actually extend the name of the items that are listed on this project. So I'm just going to take the item name field and extend this out. Go into preview mode. And now this allows us more information about, like, let's just say, for instance, this Sony object. Now we can see more of the information. So if you have long object names, this is a good trick to do. This is a good trick to show all the information that you want to see about that object name. I'm gonna go back into layout mode, and another thing you can do is we can keep the name, the size of this field the same, and we can display different data. So I'm actually going to copy this field and paste it right here. And I don't have a good field in mind, but let's just say we actually wanted to display the field by the name of I really didn't have a field in mind, but I'm just going to put barcode. This is a good one. If I wanted to display the barcode field here, any one of these guys that had a barcode, all the information would show up there. So now, preview mode and print layouts are very, very complex. They're extremely complex because of how FileMaker move objects around. You'll notice that as I scroll down this layout right here, there's a lot of objects on this layout. And I'm going to go ahead and click on one. I'm going to go ahead and click on this one. This one says creative direction. There's a field called creative direction. And basically, if you go back to your inspector tool and click on the position tab, you'll see the sliding and visibility section. And basically what this says is, if this field is empty and there's nothing inside of it, slide it up and reduce the section that it resides in. So this section, this body section, will only show this line, this entire line right here, unless there's some information in any one of these fields for that particular object. And I'm going to show you how that works right now. So we're sitting on this project, to what do I owe this? And none of the line items have any information. None of the, no, I'm sorry about that. I was looking at a question of, I'm going to actually answer this question right now. So none of these items have any information in that creative direction field. But if I actually exit out, and I'm going to go back to this project actually. So I'm going to navigate back to our projects and go to events actual. And I'm just going to select this Avid one item right here. And I'm going to go to its events module and go to notes and creative and type in on its, I'm going to type in hello world. And this one. Now if we go back to this project and click on print this, you'll notice that the Avid one now has some creative directions that says this one, and then the notes is actually hello world. So those items only appear if there's contents inside of them, and if there's not any contents inside of them, it slides up the next object beneath it and just covers that space. So when you're dealing with those, you're gonna have to pay close attention to their sliding rules and sliding principles. Now let me just go back and answer this question. It says, okay, how can you sort now by the member ID you just created in the context? So the question is, we created this field earlier called member ID, and this member had an ID of 1235, and I'm going to create, let me say show all. I'm just going to go to another member and give him an ID of 3456, and I'm going to go forward and give this guy an ID of 789. If you wanted to sort by this field, you see this sort button up top. You can click on sort, and then it's going to ask you which field do you want to sort by. So I'm going to scroll down and say I want you to sort by my user number field. Move it over. Do you want to sort? And once you click on the sort order over here, you can choose ascending or descending. Click on sort, and you'll see that this item is actually sorted 789 1 2 3 5. Actually, that's actually the order that I created in, so probably it'll be best to show the reverse sort. I'm going to click on it again, choose the same field, sort it in descending order, and click on sort. Now you'll see that 345 comes first in the list, followed by 1 2 3 5, followed by 789 because it's in descending order. If you want to make that sort automatic, now this was a part of my basic scripting, FileMaker scripting right here. If you wanted to make that sort automatic, what you would do is you would go into layout mode, click on the object, and right click it. Go to button setup, and under button setup you have the ability to do a lot of basic one-off FileMaker scripting. So I'm going to scroll down this list to say that I'm going to scroll down this list to the records section. Is it records? No. Give me one sec. Found set. So here, sort records. And I'm going to say that whenever you perform this function, you do not want to see a dialog box. Basically, a dialog box will show you that same dialog box that you had earlier, asking you how you want to sort. But because this is going to be automatic, I'm going to say do not show the dialog box. And this is the same dialog box I'm talking about. You know, if you did not have this option selected, this would pop up every single time you clicked on our button. And I'm going to say whenever we click on the member ID label, we want it to sort by the user number, and we're going to put this in descending order. Hit OK. And now, instead of clicking on this object every single time and having to specify the sort, now you can just click on this object and it'll automatically just sort all your whole list. We no longer have the member ID listed on this page, so we can't see it, but I'm just going to pull it out as a quick reference real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go over here and copy it. Then I'm going to go back to the list layout. And paste it. And just so that we can actually see the numbers, I'm just going to highlight this field yellow by clicking the highlight button. And this is showing you those three. This is showing the actual sort order. So it's going from highest to lowest, and then all the other ones don't have a member ID, so there's nothing inside of them. But obviously, if I was to type in a member ID here, like if I typed in 5, this would just automatically fall in that sort order, because right now the entire list is being sorted by this number. So I hope that answered your question. Let me just remove this back out. And just to recap on this, member ID object right here, when in layout mode, if you need, and this, let me just show, I'm going to show you something, but I'm going to show you over here in projects, because this is probably easier. I'm going to go into my list of projects, and I'm going to go to the client info tab and specify due dates on these projects. I'm going to say this project is due on the 7th. And I'm just going to randomly assign due dates to all these projects. And now in Studio Suite, even though we have a number of reports, and we do have a lot of reports, unfortunately, it's we can't think of all the reports. But a lot of times people want some basic functionalities, like for instance, a button that says show me all projects that are due this week. Now this is going to go into our advanced / basic FileMaker scripting, but because we just spoke about creating a button in the context module that actually did a sort on that just did a one-off sort, I'm going to show you how to create a button that finds all projects that are due this week. So if we look at our projects, this is a list of all our projects in the system. We have 603 projects, of which only 3 projects are due this week, and these 3 have a due dates of the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and the 7th. So if I wanted to create a script that only found these 3 projects and return them to me, this is how you would do something as simple as that. I'm going to go into layout mode. And again, with our tools up top, this little hand tool, clicking on this little button, is a button tool. So I'm going to click on this button. And I'm going to say I want to put a button right here between these guys. And now it's asking, now FileMaker is asking me, what do you want this button to do? I'm going to go and say that I want this button to perform a find. Give me 1 second. There we go. This is the find that I want. Under the found sets, I'm going to say I want to perform a find. And I'm going to specify what kind of find do I want. So I'm going to click on new. So right here is asking me what type of what's my criteria? What am I looking for? So I'm going to specify my criteria by saying let me create a new criteria, and it's going to say in the layout, this is the projects module, so I'm going to look for the due date field. Scroll down. Just do like that, due date field. And my criteria is going to be that I'm going to insert an operator, find everything that's greater than or equal to, and then I'm just going to type in Monday's date, which was if I'm not mistaken, was the 5th. Well, let's just do the 3rd for now of 2013. I'm going to add this to my criteria. Hit OK, hit OK, hit OK. And now it's asking me to label this button. So I'm just going to tell this, I'm just going to call this week find. Oops. Maybe week find was too long, so I'm just going to call it week. I'm going to exit layout mode. And once I click on week now, you'll see that it just took the whole found set and reduced it to only items that are due during this week. So a lot of times, like I said, if you just need a simple button to just do one little procedure, it is worth investing in learning how to actually create these basic scripts in FileMaker. Now, this button is not a script. It's just it's a button that's executing a script step directly. If you need to execute more than one script steps in succession, then you need to actually go ahead and create a full-fledged script. And you do that by going into scripts, clicking on manage scripts, and like you might have heard us say this before, but CSV is highly customizable, so you can actually create any script that you want. You just have to use all the fields that we provide you. I'm going to say that I want to create a new script. This is asking me for our script name. What do I want to call the script? I'm going to call it project find. And what this script step is going to do is, what I'm going to actually do, let me get this out of our way, show you what I'm looking at, is I'm going to have this script find all projects that are due this week and begin with the word delete. So it's looking for a project name with delete, and that it actually is due this week. So I'm going to say perform find, and we're going to say that we want to enter find mode. Set the field by the name of project name. And I'm gonna specify that I want to set it to the word delete. And then I'm going to also say I want to set the field, specify which field I want to set, and this is the field called due date. And I'm going to say that I want to set this to be greater than or equal to 2/3/13. You know what? I actually forgot one. I forgot one aspect. I forgot to actually execute that find. So after I enter find mode, it's going to go and set the project name to delete, set the due date to greater than 2/3/13, and then I'm going to have to say perform the find or execute the find. So now I'm going to go back to our projects list and just tell it to show me all projects again. Let me go into layout mode and I'm going to reassign this button. So now currently this button is performing a singular find, but I'm going to tell it I want you to perform a scripted find now. So I'm going to say perform a script. I'm going to go to specify, and this little search button allows you to find your script, and I just know that my script has the word find inside of it. So I'm going to type in find, it's going to reduce it down, and I'm going to scroll this list, and this is my script right here, project find. Say okay, okay, and exit the layout. So now once I click on this, it'll actually execute that script, and hopefully it'll find only projects with the name delete inside of it that's due this week, which should only be 2 projects. And I just need to make one adjustment to our script, which is to tell it to not to stop, to just fully. Right now it says enter find mode and pause. We're just going to tell it do not pause. Let's execute all the way through. Hit save. And let's just go back out again. And now we're going to re-execute our script. And you'll just see that it found everything due this week with the word delete inside of it. And so that's some basic scripting right there. If you can follow that, again, there's a lot of resources online that'll teach you how to do FileMaker scripts. Feel free to call us whenever you need to do a script. We can always guide you and help you out with it. Now, following our scripts can tend to be a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to pull up my managed scripts here again, and I'm just going to show you one of our scripts. And don't be intimidated, but I'm going to show you a script that executes whenever you finish the creation of a project. So let me first show you what the creation of a project looks like. I'm just going to go here and say that I want to create a new project. I'm going to select my client, call this test for webinar. And whenever you finish, this is me about to create a project. Whenever I create a project and I click on next, the system goes through a number of processing, trying to gather information, and and then it's going to put you on the create new project screen. But all of what just happened just now, if I was to show you in real time, I'm just going to go back to the finished project creation script. And this is what that script looks like. So trying to read and understand this can be very daunting. So if you needed to modify this, more likely you would call us to modify it. But if your scripting gets to that level that you feel comfortable that you can go in here and kind of follow it, I wouldn't suggest it, but you can you can go ahead and do that, especially if you're a FileMaker aficionado. And this script is running multiple scripts. When this script actually executes, it actually hits certain portions where it actually runs other scripts and it branches off and go do other things and return and finishes off. So this is very, very complex, and I don't trust that you'll be doing that anytime soon. And that would be basic scripting right there. Now the Excel part. How does Excel work, and export into Excel? I'm going to go to a project that has or better yet, let me just come here. Here's a list of projects, right? So if we run our script and we see that we found these 2 projects that fit our criteria of our script, which is to find all projects due this week. Now you might want to send this to somebody. This list might be 300 records long, and you want to export this to Excel and send it to somebody else because that person does not have access to Studio Suite. What you can do is just go under File, say you want to export these records. It's going to ask you for the format and the location that you want to store it in. So I'm going to say I want to export it as an Excel document. and I would store it let me just store it in my desktop. I'm sorry, I clicked on import. I meant to say file export records. So here it's asking me for the type. Say Excel. The location is going to be my desktop. I'm just going to call this test. Hit save. It's asking me for worksheet names. You can just hit continue on that. Excel's just going to put sheet 1 on it. It's asking you for the fields that you want to export. You can look here and kind of get the name of the fields that are visible, that are currently visible. So I might just say I need to export the project name. Move that over. And I also need to export the due date and move that over. And so these are the only two fields that are going to export from this list. Click on export. And because I don't have Excel on this computer, it didn't go through, but I can actually show you the same export, not using Excel, but just using like a comma separated or a tab. Let me just use comma separated list. We're gonna call this test. It's remembering that I want to export the project name and the due date, and then I'm gonna click on export. Now if I go to my desktop, you'll see that I have my test CSV right here. I'm gonna click on it, and I'm not sure what it's gonna open in. Oh, Apache OpenOffice. And OpenOffice is trying to open it up. Open it up real small, but this is where all the data about that we just exported would show up in. Obviously, if you have Excel, it works a lot better if you have Excel. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys what the invoice printout looks like and how to modify that. Go over to invoices. And whenever you're looking at an invoice, this is our invoice module. Hopefully you're familiar with this. And if you say you want to print this, say OK. This is showing what the invoice looks like. One thing that's missing from here is the header, so I'm just going to go ahead and reselect my company. And let me use this guy. I'm going to click on print this again. And so you see all the company information up top, the client and bill to information, invoice numbers and invoice date, and all the line items on this invoice. Again, this is a common request to modify the look and feel of this. So the same procedure would apply as it was in the projects module where we actually modified the work order. You would just exit the layout. Well, first, before you exit, remember the name of the layout. Once you get back here, go into layout mode. Say you want to modify this layout. So I'm just going to go into the print tab, go to invoice invoices, and select the invoice print layout. And for instance, so now this is our layout. So I need to duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate a copy. I need to go back to the original copy and leave the duplicate copy alone. This is the original. And this is the one that if I actually wanted to make the date show up as red, okay. Here we go. So if I actually wanted the date on these line items to be red, I could just come in here, make this red, exit, go into preview mode, and you'll see all my dates are red. A super common theme is how the header appears. Some people don't like this format of company and address. So if you have your own means of how you want this to appear, you can just go ahead and readjust all this stuff up here. Even if I want to italize that, you can go ahead and italize that, and you can move the objects around any which way you feel. So I'm just going to undo that, undo this guy, return to the print menu. And, again, so all those, everything that we learned previously in the projects module applies here as far as, how to customize that printout right there. And that would be it regarding the customizations. I have a few questions. So let me just get to those. It says back on the pre-invoice, back on the pre-invoices, you can't remove the subheader date from the top, just the dates themselves. I think I know what this person is asking about. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Is we earlier we removed the date field from here, and we still have the date header up here. Yeah, you can also remove this. Obviously, if you remove that date field, you're gonna want to do the same. And don't get confused. And the question was, let me just get on that layout real quick, and then I'll answer the question. Go to events, actual charge. When, so you see these the dark labels up here, and all the labels are usually prefixed with a S character. So if I zoom in on this S843, that's referencing a word in another database. So because StudioSuite is multilingual, S43 will always reference the equivalent word in your language that you have selected in your user accounts, in your user menu. So this is just the label for the actual field itself. So because we moved the dates, you would also more likely want to move the label off the field, so it's not reflected on there. So then that's how it would look. And just in case you didn't understand what I meant just now by referencing, in StudioSuite, whenever you set it up, you can set it up for your language. So if I had Spanish selected as my default language, then instead of date, it would say the equivalent of date in Spanish. And let me move on. So hopefully that answered that question. Let me move on to the next question. Is this webinar an hour and a half? It's an hour. I'm pretty much done now. So this is the Q&A section of it. So we're just wrapping up. It says, can you please remind me where the translations for the text are? Our location for the translation of the text have changed. So if you want to see all the text, you would have to go under show on this window menu up here, up top. Go to Show, Resources, and it'll put you on this label right here. So right now, I'm currently modifying the English section. So for instance, if I wanted to modify date, for instance, I would come to the search field and type in date and click on find, and it will find all instances of the word date in the system. And you can kind of scroll down. And the one that we were looking at was just the regular date. So if I wanted to modify date, the output of date, you would change it right here. This is what's actually been displayed. So if I actually change this to dated, and then you would force the language, and then you click on this check mark. And what this does is this will go through the system and update all instances of that word. Now, if I go back here and move this and put this back where it belongs, you should see that date, what was once date, is now dated. So if you wanted to change a specific language, you would select the language that you want to change from here, and then you would just modify the values, and then make sure you click the check mark to update the system to reflect the new words. But what I like to do is, because a lot of these words are, post-production words, or they're audio words, so we're all familiar with them no matter what country you're in. I just like to change the English language and not necessarily select a new language. So I would just, you know, change whatever you need in here so that you don't have to, because we have about 3,000 words in the system, so you don't want to change all 3,000 of them. So I would just change the English version and just change the necessary words that you need changed. That tends to be a lot easier for me. And that will conclude our demo. Just want to thank you for joining us. Also, let's go back to our slide again. Just want to remind you that our next our next webinar is February 14th at 1 p.m. And that will be covering budgeting in Studio Suite, and that's with Joe Stoner. Again, you're going to receive an email, so please just give us some feedback as far as the demo and any kind of future content that you want to hear covered. Okay? Thanks, and goodbye.